Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. Sorry for some mixed messages today. I initially forgot that the show was supposed to be an hour later for my guest, and then now it looks like my guest is running late and I may have forgotten to properly confirm with them in advance. So we will see what happens momentarily. Fortunately, I do have a few thoughts on my mind that we can talk about. And if anybody is out there and has their own thoughts or questions for the chat, feel free to contribute. And I will respond as best I can since for right now it's just me. Hopefully Phoenix will join us when they're able. There's lots of stuff happening at once though right now. We've got the war with Iran and Israel, and Trump having decided to announce last night that, oh yeah, we're in it. We've got anti-ICE riots, as there should be, in Los Angeles and other cities where ICE is kidnapping people. That's something that I definitely have thoughts and opinions on too. We've got all the bullshit from the Democrats as they get ready for the midterm elections, but do nothing to organize or raise power or even talk about actual progressive policies that will really help the people whose votes they want to win, because they're still all gearing up for the election. And all they want to focus on is criticizing Trump and painting all the other Republicans as Trump people so that they can then win in the midterms based on Trump's unpopularity without having to actually deliver anything. In fact, my prediction now is when the Democrats do take back the House at the midterm, because they're going to, I mean, as much as I may not like the Republican and Democrat paradigm of our system, the fact is Trump has made himself look so foolish and so unpredictable and so unreliable that we're going to see Democrats take back the House at the midterm. The thing is when they do, we're going to see them talk about how they want to work with Trump to achieve the parts of his agenda that will help the American people. And there are no parts of Trump's agenda that will help the American people. That's just the Democrats sucking up to their donors, as always. They're talking about this conflict in Iran as if the only issue is that Trump doesn't have Congress's permission, and not about the fact that we are allowing Israel to drag the United States into a major war with Iran for no good reason or any sort of payoff. Trump is supposed to be the transactional guy, and he's getting into a war with Iran with no conceivable payoff or reward. Why? Because Bibi Netanyahu is making macho noises and Trump doesn't want to look scared after the Democrats called him Taco Trump? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his head or why. All I can say is I think all the people who have been saying, oh, Trump's anti-war, should consider about whether Trump really is anti-war when it comes to Iran. That's definitely worth thinking about right now, because it doesn't look like he is. It looks like he wants the same war with Iran that John McCain wanted in 2008 and that the Republican Congress wanted in 2012 and 2016. So, hey, if you thought Trump was anti-war, it looks like we were wrong. If you thought Trump was going to be upset by what was happening in Palestine and disgusted by Netanyahu and unable to deal with the carnage in Gaza. Well, no, it looks like that was also wrong, and Trump is fine with that and is willing to expand it to Iran. I think it's important to remember that war with Iran is a very different picture than war with Iraq was, or war in Afghanistan was, or even the ridiculously one-sided destruction of Gaza by Israel. It looks a lot, war with Iran looks a lot more like war between Ukraine and Russia, and that hasn't gone very well for either side. That's what war with Iran looks like if it happens. The US and Iran get bogged down in something awful that just makes things horrific for everyone and doesn't benefit anyone. That's where we end up. The same sort of mess as Ukraine. And the only way out of it is to not start it. And it looks like Trump has missed that boat already. I really do think that these things right now matter, and that there isn't a lot that we can do except protest and organize to take care of ourselves. I've been saying for a long time, things are going to get worse before they get better. We need to be able to take care of each other, take care of ourselves. Mutual aid matters. Self-defense and community defense matter. And at that point, when we've built those mutual aid systems and those self-defense and community defense systems, that's when we can start thinking about meaningful revolutionary action. And we need to get there, because until we get to that point of meaningful action, we're still going to suffer. And we're going to feel powerless until we get to that point where we're taking our power back. Not taking revolutionary action will not save our lives or protect us from violence. The violence has already started. A lot of what's happening now has the energy of the West German cops in the 1960s when they started shooting people with live ammo. I mean, I don't know how far along we are. I don't know how far away we are from the cops using live ammo instead of rubber bullets. Though it's very much worth knowing that at least one journalist, Linda Tirado, is dying of complications of being shot in the face with a rubber bullet by cops in Minnesota in 2020. So a lot of people have read and been influenced by, is dying, was murdered by the police, will die because of the cops. And, any one of us who protests or writes or streams could potentially be next. I don't mean that to sound paranoid or scared, but we're getting to the point where they're clamping down on people for what they say online. People who are finally being released from ICE detention were locked up in ICE detention in the first place because they said things on Twitter the president didn't like. Think about that. They still haven't gone to El Salvador and brought that boy home to reference something that one of Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley's constituents said to him at a town hall, which still, I still see that and don't know what to think. The guy looking right at, the old white guy in Iowa looking right at Chuck Grassley and saying to him, when are you going to El Salvador and bringing that boy home? That was an amazing moment that I didn't expect to see at a Republican town hall. Something to think about, something to talk about as you go through the week. I wish I could say that the Iran mess had the same sort of hopeful energy to it as the reaction against Trump's immigration policies. There is no judge who can tell Trump to stop bombing another country. And while we can protest the war and we can take action to sabotage the war machine, the way Palestine Action has been trying to sabotage the Israeli war machine, there are limits to what we can do to help people in Palestine. And that's something that we have to live with, because we haven't organized ourselves to take that revolutionary action sooner, because we have potential but no movement. And this potential but no movement has been going around for a long time. Trotsky was saying that there was revolutionary potential in the US, but no revolutionary movement in 1908. Lenin was saying similar things in 1919 and 1920. There's revolutionary potential in the United States, but no revolutionary movement. There was a revolutionary movement for a while in the 60s and the 70s, but that was violently quashed by the US government, and the leaders were killed or imprisoned or intimidated into becoming liberals. And now that movement is gone before it really got anywhere. Which leads us to where we are now, 50 years on from the 1970s, and once again having potential but no movement. So what can we do about that? There are limits. There's great advice out there: join a socialist organization. But how many socialist organizations are actually thinking about revolutionary action and not just channeling energy into third-party political activism that may or may not lead anywhere? I'm not saying we don't need to do electoral work. We do. And whether we like it or not, the largest avenue for any sort of revolutionary electoral work is still the Green Party, though the PSL is growing. But the Green Party has lots of flaws. I don't think those flaws should stop us from engaging. But it's important to remember that engaging in politics within the Green Party is still engaging with liberals to a great extent. They're liberals who are serious about a New Deal liberalism that is not active anymore, that still ultimately believes in some sort of Marxian social democratic future, even if it doesn't have the strength to believe in a Marxian a Marxian social democratic present, or a revolution within the lifetime of the people thinking about it. And that's part of the problem, is that revolutionary organizing isn't something that you can pace. It's all impossible until suddenly everything's possible and opportunity matters. But at the same time, someone has to be doing something to create opportunity. There has to be a movement that is keeping the demands of the working people, the disabled people, the marginalized people of our society front and center all the time, and never backing off from them. The Democrats aren't doing that. The Green Party is doing a better job of doing that. People don't see the Green Party very much outside of Green Party circles, and that's something that needs to be worked on. I've been trying to work on it some, despite not being a Green Party person myself. But we still need also to do real revolutionary work that no existing socialist organization is actually doing. Something to be thinking about. A revolutionary movement has to have a military wing capable of protecting its leadership, its members, It's programmed. At some point, we have to be able to defend folks from being murdered by the police or kidnapped by ICE. That's capacity that appears to be growing in Los Angeles, and we have to cheer them on, and people elsewhere need to copy them. I think that's a good basic start. I don't like to talk too much about a lot of this stuff on the internet. There are things that we shouldn't talk about on the internet, except to get the thoughts beginning, and real conversation should happen between people off the internet who are ready to do the organizing work. But it's still important to think about the sort of things that we should be doing and organizing toward. And that's why I'm here talking, even though it looks like I'm not going to have a guest today, because I do think a lot of this stuff is important. It looks potentially like there is a chance that Zohran Mamdani may win the mayoral primary in New York for the Democrats. If that happens and he becomes the Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City, then we will either see some sort of independent candidacy by Cuomo to suck all the energy out of Mamdani, or we'll just see the Democratic Party shift its attention back to Eric Adams despite everything, on the idea that, Eric Adams is still better than some Democratic socialist. And in the off chance that Zohran Mamdani wins, I think we're going to see the Bill de Blasio effect, where the institutional forces of New York City rise up to make it impossible for him to break away from the chosen liberal path. Remember, Bill de Blasio was held hostage by the NYPD in many ways and ended up becoming another pro-cop mayor despite his many progressive promises. It's very easy to see Zohran Mamdani twisted in that same direction. I'm not saying this to be a downer or to be a pessimistic, but to point out that there are limits to the electoral system. It might be able to better circumstances, but it can only better circumstances in situations where institutional party systems allow politicians to act. I'm not sure if New York City has reached that point yet. New York City has been controlled by the landlord and the boss for a long time. They don't have a history of being directly represented in their government recently. The closest that comes was an activist public advocate. And there are limits to what the public advocate can do. It's a largely ceremonial position, which is why an activist leading protests is the best public advocate New York City has had for a while. I have other things on my mind. Some of those thoughts are jumbling together right now, which means all of this is more stream of consciousness than it would have been if I had prepared to do a solo show. I'm sorry about that. My brain keeps coming back to the fact that many Republicans and some Democrats who will never admit it, but who think exactly the same way Republicans do when it comes to religion, are preparing for the rapture and think they're going to be ditching us any day now. I'm sure Mike Pence is wondering what he's still doing here. I don't believe in that kind of end of days. I don't think there's any magic early trip to heaven that'll let folks skip any of this. I don't even believe that the apocalypse is the end of the world in a literal forever extinction event sense. I think that the apocalypse is something that continually happens as the world recreates itself as a result of the conflicts and progress and mistakes and regressions and backward steps made by people. Ultimately, history is the sum collective choices made by people, influenced by the actions of, world historical events and people. The big world historical events going on right now are a conflict between Nazis in Ukraine and Russian nationalists in Russia that is trying to remake a map of Eastern Europe in either a new or an old image. And the ongoing genocide of Palestinians by Israel that now threatens to spill into a massive war with Iran in the Middle East. It's hard to be optimistic. There is good news too, but it's hard to be optimistic right now. My realistic look at things is that we are getting to see more revolutionary action from more people in more places. I think we're close to seeing the kind of uprisings we saw in 2020. Regardless of my dislike for liberal faux activism in this of the sort expressed by the leaders of the No Kings protest and by financier Christy Walton, I do believe that the fact that so many people were willing to come out for the No Kings protests means there is energy, revolutionary energy that can be channeled. But we have to be able to engage with this faux activism that we are seeing and convince people that there is a real activism in revolutionary action and that we need more people to join a more radical cadre to start building a real revolutionary movement. I do feel that we're going to see something taking shape. I feel like it's impossible for something not to take shape, and that the people who are talking about it are very wisely not talking about it on the internet. So I feel like something at some point should definitely happen, but I don't know what or when or how. We are seeing right-wing violence already. A Trump-supporting security entrepreneur with fantasies of being a cop put on a cop uniform and drove a police car to murder a Democratic state assembly person in Minnesota and her husband, and the Republicans took over the state house as a result of that politically motivated assassination. And the fact that right-wingers are committing political violence in order to take majorities in state houses is something that liberal Democrats should take seriously and should make them consider that maybe they need to think in more revolutionary ways and oppose the things that the state is doing any way they can from within the government. I don't see that happening, but I would really love to see the Democrats become a serious opposition party. That's a fantasy. That will always be a fantasy. The Democrats are one of the ruling parties, no matter who is actually in the majority, because of the way our system works. The Democrats will always be trying to make common cause with Republicans in order to, quote unquote, govern effectively. And the Democrats care more about governing effectively than they care about their own alleged agenda. My next prediction is, Chuck Schumer is going to be the Joe Biden of the Iran war. He will carry water for Donald Trump and pro-Iran war Republicans in the way Joe Biden carried water for the Iraq war for George W. Bush and pro-war Republicans. That's where we are now. Chuck Schumer, he's Joe Biden in the buildup to W's invasion of Iraq. And Hakeem Jeffries, he's Nancy Pelosi in the buildup to W's invasion of Iraq. They're going to be the cheerleaders. They're going to lie, cheat, and steal to convince you that the Republican president's war is righteous and we should support it like patriots. And they're going to convince themselves that they're doing it because it's politically necessary, because they can't oppose an American president dragging us into war and still appear patriotic, because they care more about appearing patriotic to Republicans, who will never see them as patriotic, than they care about being seen as liberal by other Democrats. There is a Canadian professor who writes about liberal socialism and about how the Canadian Liberal Party should embrace socialist movements and recreate itself as a democratic socialist party. And I think that's the same sort of naive optimism that DSA has about the Democratic Party when they think, well, if we just keep running people for Congress, eventually we'll be able to make something happen. And I admire their optimism and their stick-to-itiveness, but they don't appear to be getting the job done yet, and they appear to be sucking a lot of energy into the Democrats that would be better spent on real organizing. Which is the number one criticism of groups like No Kings and the protests that they announce and that they get people to show up to, is a lot of that energy is not spent on the demands of the people, but on a narrower list of demands designed to be acceptable to people like Christy Walton, who are willing to put money out to help organize a visually impressive protest that doesn't have any concrete consequences because there isn't a coherent list of demands. We need to maybe start thinking about what our demands are for our communities. I know as a working person, the things that matter most to me are the rent is too high, groceries cost too much, and I need universal health care really bad, and so does my wife. That aside, I know there are demands other communities have that they consider important, and we don't want to be too universalist. We need to make sure that demands for reparations for Black Americans and proper protection from ICE for immigrant communities and people who will be accused of being immigrants in order to be targeted by ICE for more Gestapo-based reasons. And we need to be paying attention to those demands too. We need to be paying attention to demands in the queer community because those people are under assault by the federal government right now, regardless of which party is in power. And we need to keep that in mind. And we need to keep moving those demands forward by any means necessary at all times, being fully prepared to defend ourselves against violence, because inevitably someone is going to use violence against us. And I'm not going to ask anyone to meekly let themselves be killed for their beliefs. I think people should defend themselves when it comes down to it. You have the right to life too. And protesting the violence of your state against your people should not deprive you of your right to life. Invoking your right to free speech and free assembly should not deprive you of your right to life. Demanding that your rights to food and shelter and health care be met should not deprive you of your right to life. Something to think about. Since it doesn't look like I'm going to have a guest today, and since I've taken up about 30 minutes of your time going on already, and I know that my wife hates to watch anybody go on too long, I will assume you guys don't want to see me monologue for too much longer either, and just say thank you for listening to me if you're still here. I apologize for scheduling issues and for not having a guest. And I hope everything goes better. Until next week, I will tweet at you. Have a great Sunday, friends.